Right. Good afternoon, all. Call the meeting to order of the Committee on Technology special meeting Thursday, May 23rd, 2024. First order of business is election of chairperson. And I would like to, and I not like to, I will, I nominate Bill DiBella for chair of the Technology Committee.
Second.
Any other nominations? Nominations closed. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?
Aye.
Opposed?
Aye.
Carries. I'm sorry, John, did you need to verify some of these numbers?
No problem. I see Commissioner Salemi is on the WebEx, and there's a couple phone numbers. Are there any other commissioners attending remotely?
Taylor.
Thank you, Commissioner Taylor. Anyone else?
Trade seats with you?
Okay, thank you.
You're gonna go from there?
I go for it. Just doesn't matter. Stay there.
Yeah.
Doesn't matter. May need. Thank you. Thank you very much for the nominations and the reappointment as chairman of the Technology Committee. The second order of business is the election of a vice chairperson. Is there a nomination?
Mr. Chairman, I nominate Joan Gentile.
Okay.
Second?
Second.
Second.
Are there further nominations?
Move the nominations be closed.
If not, all those in favor of Commissioner Gentile signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed? Okay, we got a vice chairperson. Public comments relative to agenda items.
Quiet today.
Public comments? Public comments? Item 4. Item 5, approval of the minutes of November 30th, 2023. Is there a motion?
So moved, Adel.
Second.
It's moved and seconded. Are there any additions or deletions or corrections in the minutes? If not, all those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed?
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, passed. Item 6, discussion of legislative actions. Brendan, are you here to give us a little background on what went on? Why don't you sit up at the, yeah, that's good.
Brendan Fox from Gaffney Benton Associates. Mr. Chairman, if I'm not mistaken, a report that was prepared by the Office of District Counsel was shared with members of the committee that reviews the legislative actions that occurred this past session. One bill was House Bill 5444, entitled a bill establishing a test bed technology program. This bill did not pass either the Senate or the House. It did come out of the Energy and Technology Committee. It was opposed by the administration, as I reported to the board in the past. It was opposed by the administration because of a belief on the part of the administration that this program that would have been established would compete with an existing program that was managed by Connecticut Innovations that benefited in-state companies. Basically, what this bill did or would do, it would allow state agency commissioners to identify a technology, to establish a pilot program, to determine whether that technology would produce savings for the agency, and if so, a board that was established which would include 4 members could identify that technology and avoid certain procurement rules that are on the state books. That's what it did. Again, the bill came out of the Energy and Technology Committee. but did not have a vote in either the House or the Senate. Happy to answer any questions.
I recall being at the initial meeting of the, were you at that meeting of the technology, Energy and Technology Committee?
I was not at that meeting.
Okay. The House Chairman, Representative Steinberg, who was pushing this whole concept, pointed out that they had had discussions with the governor's office and that it had been vetoed the year before. This is what was expressed by the chairman to the committee, that it had been, they had discussed it with the governor's office, and the governor's office claimed that there was a mistake in how it happened and that they were fine and they were moving forward. And that was the first meeting. The second meeting they had, all of a sudden there was all kinds of controversy again on it.
Yeah.
And basically a lot of what you said was the issue. And my understanding was, in the original bill, the intent was to eliminate the Clean Air Act, if you were, whatever the legislative act that you were dealing or trying to deal with, that was going to be excluded from the pilot because it was a pilot. And also, I believe they were talking about excluding it from the environmental justice process. And I guess that received no, because I went to a meeting up there that Steinberg had called amongst a group of people. It wasn't a formal board meeting, it was a meeting he had. And that was one of the issues that they were trying to promote, saying, why do we, if we're doing a pilot relative to, let's take the CTEC issue, because it was their lobbyist that was doing it, Steinberg. Why would we have to go through the Clean Air Act and get approval from DEEP? This is what my understanding was from the meeting, because I walked in halfway through it. And apparently that was never brought up in the context of the legislation. Did you see any legislation that dealt with the issue of excluding the Clean Air Act or whatever act it would be from a pilot?
No, I never saw anything like that. I never heard anything like that.
I guess Steinberg never brought it up because it wasn't at a public meeting.
Yeah.
It was at a meeting he held in his office.
Yeah. Again, the MDC did not lobby this bill.
No, I know.
And I never heard any discussion about exempting any pilot program from any environmental standards or permit requirements.
Chairman?
Questions?
I have,
Yeah, Connecticut
David?
Innovations, are they, David Drake, Connecticut Innovations, are they doing any projects right now that they're worried about taken away from?
So Connecticut Innovations, the program that they manage is
I mean, I understand that they're actually managing a program that actually does something like this, or is it just a hope?
no, the program's been in place. I don't know.
Is there a project they're working on, well, specific?
like
okay.
this.
Like this, is there a real project, or is it just a dream, they hope to work with some Connecticut companies? I don't know, I just never heard of anything. I of any companies that do what we're looking for, forget about CTEC, but even something close, I just don't know. You know, I'm a little familiar with that type of industry, I just don't know anybody in Connecticut that does that stuff. It is what it is.
Yeah, I don't know the answer to the question.
And one last question, was there any money involved in this?
No.
Talked about, there's no dollar figure in that.
Well, there was nothing, my understanding, the bill was just permission to do it, wasn't it?
There was some environment, there was some revenue, not revenue,
Well,
some costs associated, but not much.
Yeah,
$1,000.
in one of in a draft,
A draft.
I believe that there would be some nominal fee paid to the state to cover administrative costs, and that fee, I think, if I recall correctly, was
Well, weren't they trying to form a committee?
a committee would have been appointed by it would include the the comptroller, the treasurer, or their designees, and I believe the secretary of OPM and possibly the secretary of DAS.
What was driving it basically was the University of Connecticut,
Right.
proposal that they had discussed with UConn. And I also believe there's something to do with Farmington, wasn't there, Brendan? Farmington was, I know UConn had something in writing, which they submitted. Did you see the document that was on?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was,
And,
Yeah, but that's just for CTEC, but this is just says test bed technologies. It's a pretty wide scope of,
no, I'm just saying that what was articulated
it's really about that.
was about the UConn issue.
Mr. Chairman.
Go ahead, I'm sorry. Henry.
Commissioner Adel, that's all right. Do we think that we should be lobbying on this, on behalf of this bill next year? Or we think maybe the governor's office is perpetually gonna have objections, whether it's deep or whatever, that's objecting to this?
Commissioner Ollie can tell you is that if the same bill is proposed, absent discussions that the chairman, the committee chairman may have with the administration, I think the bill will continue to be opposed by the administration. I'll also, you may recall at a board meeting when this bill was talked about in the context of just in a general update, the Chris Stone, the district council, and I have looked at that, and under the terms of this bill, we would suggest that the district board already has the authority to do what this bill would have allowed the MDC to do anyway.
That was it, yeah.
So, because what the bill did, it would have allowed projects to avoid certain procurement requirements under the state rules. The MDC has its own procurement requirements, and the district board has the authority to, within reason, to avoid, under certain circumstances, certain procurement requirements.
Does that include the air quality permit?
No, that was never.
No.
No.
I didn't think so.
And that's one of the things Scott said that would be, make a pilot much easier if we could get those exemptions, but those weren't even in any bill
No, correct.
that was up there. There was absolutely no, I think what really happened was once this bill got circulated, the governor's office took the same position they took on it the year before. And that's when they try to accommodate, I believe they try to accommodate the governor's office on it. Couldn't do it. Was it Department of Administrative Services? Which department was the one that objected? Was it Administrative Services?
They were one of the agencies. OPM also filed testimony in opposition.
Right. So that's where we ended up. But the district still has the right to go to deep and request a pilot. We didn't need this legislation. Wasn't that what the position was taken by our attorney?
I think that's fair, but I don't think that that DEEP would have the authority to waive permitting requirements.
No, I understand that. But they could authorize us to do a pilot if we wanted to do a pilot.
I don't know, Mr. Chairman, to be honest with you. I don't know if they have to authorize anything, but
Wasn't the issue that the permit would take like up to 2 years to get?
Yeah, that's the problem, is getting a permit, is it not?
they are challenging.
Go ahead, David.
Based on this UConn CTEC thing we just got, if UConn and CTEC do this, and for some reason I think it's probably a stretch, doesn't that solve a whole problem? We get
Yeah, if they would do it over at
everything we do, if it works good, we
If
copy
they-
it later on.
If they do it at UConn, that's fine,
Yeah, then we can-
Pilot there would work as well as
It
any.
seems like a stretch to me, because they're offered to put the building up, put the equipment in and everything else for no money, but I don't know, more power to them.
Well, I don't know if that was the case. I had nothing to do, I didn't know anything about this.
No, I understand, but I'm just reading right now for the first time. They're gonna supply a building, the equipment, they're gonna do everything for electricity, selling electricity, which they never offered to us, but
Right.
you know, we're not that far. But
I thought we did, the pilot included no cost to us and within 6
I
months.
thought we had
should
to,
pull.
I thought we had to pay a certain amount based on all this stuff. CTEC offered us a pilot for nothing, a machine, equipment, and a building? I don't
Well,
recall that.
I don't think they were talking about the extent that they initially talked to us about.
I thought initially that was.
In this.
The discussion,
But
no.
again, I don't know that much about this other than they were talking about this at the Capitol. I didn't realize that they had gotten to this extent with UConn. I thought they just had said that they had an interest in it, but here it's in writing they put it. Did you see this document from UConn?
Yeah, I believe that was part of the record filed with the committee.
Okay, was that, okay, I didn't follow that truthfully. So, any further questions from Brendan?
Yeah, go ahead.
I'm sorry, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Curry, not so much a question, well, maybe a question. In my opinion, House Bill 5444 was not the ideal bill by any means to try to insert MDC in looking to move what we would like to happen forward. And Brendan, what is your thoughts on, my suggestion would be that this committee be more proactive, work with district council and government committee to draft a bill, a standalone MDC bill that we can somehow move forward in the legislature come January.
That's certainly within the authority of this committee and the district board, Mr. Chairman. I think a lot would depend on what the policymakers here at the MDC would like to see in that bill. You know, we've discussed at this meeting the environmental regulatory requirements. If I can represent to this committee that if there was a desire to try to avoid those, that would be very, very, very challenging to be successful in getting some exemption for anything, given the environmental advocates that are at the Capitol on a regular basis. It would be very challenging, and quite frankly, I don't think, again, if that were a piece of that bill, I think the administration would object to that. That's my sense. I don't know that for a fact.
And I agree with that.
Yeah, they probably would, but the question really exists here, how do we handle it in the state of Connecticut when you can't landfill sludge, you can't spread it on the land anymore, we couldn't do it before, okay? And you can't incinerate it now. There's gotta be some alternative that someone in the state of Connecticut is gonna have to deal with. Because the feds have clamped down on this thing in the last session not the last session, the last notice that I got that they're now clamping down on everybody on how they're going to handle this, and no one's talking about what do you do with it? If you know, my thought was when I heard that UConn was involved in it, I had no problem personally or letting UConn carry the flag and doing it there. And I actually never saw this document that they had made a formal request. I was told that they were interested in doing it. But again, I never pursued any of that. But I mean, this looks pretty representative of doing something because of the problem they're having.
Mr. Chairman,
That's Buddy.
hello?
Yeah.
Yeah. Thank you. I one of the reasons that we talked about the medical waste thing was that it was, it had a different perspective. It was a little smaller idea than the others. But to me, to move anything forward, especially at the legislature, I think that we'd have to, rather than actually put together a bill. I'm not saying that we couldn't be working on that, but I think to put together the information that would show, like, for instance, with the medical waste, that I don't want to say there's a need, because there certainly is a need to dispose of medical waste. It's just we think that there's a far more economical option. If we can dispose of it here in Connecticut. Right now it gets shipped out. Some of it gets disposed of here, but the cost is like growing, and it's an exceptional amount of waste that has to be disposed of. And I think that if we can, frame an argument in the same way for sludge, I think that to move it forward, it starts to gain some momentum and support if there's evidence and testimony or whatever to actually show that there's a financial benefit not only to the state but to all the parties that use it. The medical waste is coming from hospitals and labs and doctors' offices, and they would all, would benefit everyone, and the state of Connecticut. And the same with the waste. I mean, if there's no place to put it, I think that the same issue exists. I mean, what we have to do is build a some testimony that shows that that there's a benefit to moving forward with a pilot program on either one of the issues. And I think that has a better chance of succeeding once you go forward. And try to create a bill with it. I don't know. It's just been my experience that if those are the kinds of things that are successful when there's definitely a benefit. And I think the question on whether or not it can be supported environmentally, I think that's some of that is up to whoever we're working with, whether it's CTEC or somebody else on that, to show that that this actually has a benefit when it comes to the environment. So that's my suggestion, that we have more definitive kinds of information and about the technology itself and what it can do, and whether or not it can respond to, I guess you'd call it, the market here in Connecticut. So thank you, Mr. Chairman. That's
Further discussion? And again, I think we did get some documentation relative to the, I don't know when we're going to discuss it, relative to the question of hazardous waste or hospital waste, or the hazardous waste of consumption from Hartford Hospital, which is another piece of documentation that we have here. And I was really surprised at how little control DEEP had over what they do with it and where they ship it and how they ship it. But there's a significant amount coming out of Hartford Hospital alone. It's 313 tons of it, which that doesn't include doctors' offices and a whole bunch of other avenues of pursuit in finding it. But they ship it in and out, and I guess there's a process that they have to decontaminate it before they can incinerate it. And apparently we were under the impression that the shipping of this was out of state, as far as Kentucky in that area. But that's not the case. According to Hartford Hospital, they ship most of their waste down to New Haven. Bridgeport. And what they do is they decontaminate the I can't remember what the terminology is that they use for it. There's a process to eliminate the infectious types of materials, and then it's incinerated in the heat loop down in Bridgeport. And we met with Hartford Hospital, Scott and I did, and Scott, as he's articulated here, has had other discussions with Mr. Grant over at Hartford Hospital, who controls this aspect of it. Now, what we had initially talked about when we met with Mr. Grant was, Keith Grant, was that he was going to reach out to his colleagues. That would be St. Francis is called what?
Trinity?
Trinity. And
Trinity.
Trinity. And also UConn, and discuss with them what they were doing and what volumes they were generating. And we never got into costs. Scott's been back and forth to him, as you can see in this document that we have that Scott provided us with. But there's a substantial amount that exists. The issue of cost we never got into because Mr. Grant was still trying to pursue it with his own colleagues, and also Yale New Haven. He's going to talk to Yale New Haven because they have relationships, obviously, and they do things together. And so I guess we're going to have to go back to Keith and when Scott.
Mr. Chairman, did we start the meeting? I can't hear anything.
What's that?
It's Commissioner Patel.
Bhupin, Commissioner Patel,
Can you hear us?
can you hear us?
Nope.
Have you?
I mean, Commissioner Salemi can hear us. I think he may have his volume turned down.
I can hear. Are you asking me if I can hear you? I can hear you fine.
Yeah, but
Oops.
we've got Bhupin is on, and he's claiming he can't hear us. Is that what he's saying?
The beach is too loud.
Yeah. Mr. Chairman,
Who's
That's Al Taylor.
Al? Go ahead.
yeah, I guess I'm curious, wouldn't the whole notion of a pilot program basically is that you have a technology that essentially is going to be much better in terms of the benchmarks that it establishes is going to be much better than what the established environmental guidelines specify or indicate is an acceptable process. So wouldn't it be prudent to basically, if we're going to look at a pilot project, to basically make sure that we have marshaled all of the information, both from research and more particularly if this particular process is in use someplace else, data and information in terms of what the performance levels are. Because I think that that's particularly important. You're not bringing in something where you're running basically a test to make sure that it works. I would think that we're looking at something that is already established in place, is in operation elsewhere. And basically what we're saying is that we can put it in here and that it works. And I guess my question, and I'll just use CTEC as an example, don't they have sites that are currently in operation that have an operational history and that basically have the a substantial amount of data that can be used essentially to present and to make the case that whatever we're looking at is either much better and far exceeds any of the standards that are currently in place and that essentially may be coming down the pike. Because I mean, isn't that the threshold issue? I mean, if you're concerned about environmental justice And if you're concerned about air requirements, out the box, if you don't have the data that indicates that the process is going to work accordingly, it really, I guess basically we would sort of be chasing our tails in that sense. Or is there some other opposition to this process? I mean,
Well, the only opposition I can remember was I guess it was in 2023 when we were reviewing these technologies. We had two people sitting in from DEEP, and one was, there was a question asked if they would allow us to incinerate more waste. Tom, we remember we had that conversation, and DEEP said that they would not allow us to expand what the permit that we're provided with unless we change the air quality situation in the South Meadows. That was the only expression from DEEP that we received relative to what we were doing. Well, just sit up, Tom, at the table.
Well, Bill, I guess the question is basically if you have a technology that essentially part of the output in terms of the process is below or is far below the air quality standards, I would think that would change the thinking significantly in terms of how this is viewed. More particularly if you have an operation in place that is using the process that is subject to a regulatory framework, and you can show basically, it's hitting all the marks. And that essentially if you took that and dropped that in your particular jurisdiction or what have you, that it could operate without more or anything else and would not cause any problems. You would meet the environmental justice issues, you'd meet the air quality standards, and you would be able to process in an economic fashion the input that you want to put through.
Yeah, obviously there is operations that they're providing, but again, there's a new technology apparently that they're using with solid waste, which is that they're using on dealing with garbage in general. That's the municipal solid MSW, and
Yep.
But Tom, Al, let me just ask Tom the question: who is the commission? Who was the person at DEEP that raised that?
I think you might have been referring to Gabby Friedgen.
No.
She was the solid waste person that spoke, and she was very clear that the process as CTEC in this case described would be illegal to operate in Connecticut because of how they were handling the recycles, and it would violate state law on how recycles can be processed. So you're not allowed to burn recyclables. And their model was everything together goes into the machine, and she was very, very clear that would be deemed illegal in the state of Connecticut.
I understand that, but that wasn't the issue. The issue that I'm raising is the question. They do have a technology that separates that out. That's the municipal MSW. Mm-hmm. I'm just talking about MSW in general.
Right.
They do have that, and what they do, the CTEC piece of that is the back end of it. When they get through 75% of separation and everything else, they then the rest of that goes into a CTEC technology, and they use it for heat reclamation.
The other DEEP employee that also participated was Jameson Sinclair from the Air Bureau.
That's who it was, Jameson.
And Jameson was very clear that the first step, whether it was a pilot or any other form, would have to start with approval of an environmental justice plan. That was DEEP's step one before you could do anything, and that included pilot. Then you would have to meet applicable air regs on the pilot. So I think that DEEP didn't take a stance for or against. They just said the first step you'd have to take, regardless of the size, because we would think pilot small and versus full scale, would be you'd have to get through the environmental justice plan that would have to be developed and approved. And then whatever technology you wanted to pilot would have to meet air regs. So I think that was the two different DEEP perspectives on it. But I think as far as the demonstration of the technologies, I think we had asked very clearly multiple times, like particular to CTEC, show us exactly where you're processing solids from a wastewater treatment plant through one of your machines. And I think the answer was there was none. And they had talked about different pilots, and there's many other companies with very similar technologies around the country, around the world, that have been trying, but to my knowledge, there's no one currently doing it at any scale where they're taking wastewater sludge by itself, not unamended, whether it's wood chips or solid waste or plastics or whatever, and successfully completing that process. It's not to say that we're not on the verge of someone achieving that tomorrow, but I don't believe there's anyone running that pilot or that full-scale process. And I think, that was my understanding of how we evolved that. Yeah, it's interesting, might have great potential, but we kind of need to see others that can prove this on, this technology out.
David?
Yeah, for me, the medical waste thing to me is actually pretty interesting, and I'd like to see us pursue it more. And I'm not concerned about the technology at this point, but you guys started by going to hospitals and getting information. But how do we take that to the real level as a business plan of some sort? How much is out there? What are they paying? How much is transportation costs? What's it going to take us to collect it? Then when we know how much we have, how much the costs are, we can maybe address some technology to do it. But is it worth? Can we pay? No, can we pay somebody to do this though? I'm not. I'm just thinking.
I'm not sure we have to pay someone.
Really, I'm not sure if you don't have to pay somebody to do it. That's what they think. But I'd like to see us go to the next level. I mean, really.
Scott has been dealing directly with them, and we have one meeting, and then Scott has taken over, and he's done a good job.
No, I think he has. But let's say you went to the 4 hospitals, you got the data.
Yeah, if we can get.
And then you got there's also other costs involved. But I just, again, maybe Scott's the right guy, but I just like to, before we worry about who does the technology, I'd love to see a business plan that says
to get the information.
This is how much money they're paying. Then this is what the whole thing costs, and we go to CTEC or somebody else. Here it is. How much are we going to pay for you to do it? How much profit we make? How much selling? We need the data though.
On the first part of the issue, I think that Scott can handle that.
Okay.
Can
we push him then?
No. Hartford Hospital was very cooperative with us.
Yeah, I would think they would be. Yeah.
Grant, and he was going to pursue, as you can see. Scott's been dealing with him, and we haven't been really aggressive in it because we've been doing.
Well, like again, is it time that we should be aggressive? I mean, it's more than hospitals. There's doctors, places you pick up, and there's a whole business there that obviously if somebody does now. Maybe you talk to the people who are doing that and say, would you partner, collect it and bring it to us instead of, I don't know, but someone needs to put together a business plan with money.
Right.
Then we can get the
thing we liked the most about that was that that's a one-step deal that CTEC would have, because the heat they have would eliminate both issues.
Again, CTEC it means nothing if there's no money in it for us.
I understand that, but
so
that's why we started to look at the hospitals.
No,
what they were. So why don't we wait for the next meeting? We'll have Scott come in and we can talk about that. I can't tell you that he can do something better than someone else can do it, but Scott can.
You understand what I'm saying? Is at some point, how many pounds, how much money, how much is there a business here, or forget about it?
We know what Hartford Hospital has.
Yeah.
But we don't know what it's costing them to process it.
I'm wondering if they're proprietary, if it's proprietary. Maybe
well, and it may be.
Why would it be though? I mean, maybe, but why?
I don't think so.
And why wouldn't you want it everybody? If you're going to do it, you got to go big or go small, or
large
go home.
scale.
Go
That-
big or go home.
That was
you
the
know?
whole part of the meeting when Scott and I had the original meeting in February.
Yeah, maybe you gotta start somewhere, and you did, and I just think we need to go higher now, you know?
Okay.
Maybe spend some money on it, I don't know.
Well, I would ask that Scott be here to
I agree.
raise that issue. I don't think anybody in this room can speak for him. He knows what he can do and what he can't do, and what would be the most productive issue.
Again, for us to go to the next step, and I think this should be a next step. I just think we need some rough numbers to say, okay, this is actually
No,
pretty good.
I agree with you. And I think UConn's definitely looking at that. Their hospital piece is looking at it because
Yeah.
what they're talking about here. They've got an interest in that too. So why don't we, when Scott comes, the next meeting, that'll be an agenda item that Scott can bring us up to date on. Because he has been doing quite a bit of back and forth with them. But, you know, if they can get that relationship and get Yale New Haven, get Hartford,
Absolutely, yeah.
get St. Francis and some of the smaller hospitals together, it may be an option that there's a business out there. Don?
Thank you, Commissioner Curry. I would only suggest that, and when we had this conversation, probably the November meeting, if I recall correctly, a number was put out that hospitals generate 33 pounds of medical waste per bed per day. But in any event, if we know Hartford's numbers,
Yeah, there's.
and we know how many beds they have, we can easily figure out a good guess, a good estimate of what other hospitals, based on the number of beds, will generate in medical waste.
And I don't think this includes doctors' offices and.
No.
You need to get a handle on that too, because that could be a big number. Maybe you gotta pick it up, but
Hartford Hospital alone is 313 tons
Wow.
a year, 6,000 something pounds over a process of a 12-month period.
626.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman. Oh, Commissioner Salemi? Hello.
Commissioner Salemi.
Yeah, yeah, I think, you know, it's, when you talk about, I mean, first of all, CTEC represented that they have an active medical waste facility that they operate and that works with their process. But when you're talking about how much waste there might be out there, and you know, like how much revenue that might generate for someone that can dispose of it. It's hospitals, doctors' offices, and laboratory. Actually, the laboratories probably produce as much waste. You know, medical labs, Quest labs, and people like that. Any kind of lab, and then UConn itself, the medical school, and then other places, universities that have, you know, either medical or nursing programs. They all produce some form of medical waste. And I think that to get a picture of that, you know, you could somehow, I like you said, I'm not sure that how much DPH or, you know, through DEP, through DPH regulates or monitors that. But certainly those numbers are out there. And I think that if you know, made an effort to collect all of it, I think you'd see, you know, a significant business opportunity if you can dispose of the waste, you know, properly and safely right here in Connecticut. I think that's, you know, you'd be providing all of those the entities that produce this waste with an opportunity for a more economical disposal rate. So I think it includes more than just the hospitals, like we said, and a lot more than just the hospitals.
Well,
Mr. Chairman,
Commissioner
Commissioner Patel here.
Commissioner Patel?
Yes, sir. In my opinion, we have been talking same thing over and over and over. Now it is time for someone, and I think it should be simply assigned to administration, come up with a written plan to make this visible. How, doing all whatever it takes, let them bring it, all the information with us, and Then second part will be what DEP, EPA, etc. approves, that to be kept separate. And then later on, we can check with each other, each results, and then decide whether or not we need the approval, how we need the approval, how to go about it.
Further discussion?
Thank you.
We're actually into item number
Yeah, we are. 7.
7. New technologies. Mr. Chair.
Mr. Chairman,
Commissioner Curry here. Have we, and we may have, and I don't recall, but have we requested numbers from any of our, any of those who responded to the RFIs with their numbers for air quality, what the systems they now have in place in other countries?
Yeah, we did. I mean, that was in that information, but there was what, Tom, 2 companies that dealt with an actual technology that we dealt with. Some did partially and some did more than others, but no one had a comprehensive, except CTEC came up with, as I saw it.
Yeah, I think there was some data. I think there was a question about units with a lot of the data. And so when you just look at a number, if you don't know the unit on it, it's kind of meaningless. So I think we had questions about the units and also, you know, the standards by which the data get generated are really very important because we have to follow very, very strict EPA methods that are highly technical to produce a valid piece of data. Like we can't just give DEEP or EPA a number. It has to be correctly QA'd, QC'd, and then it has to be done by someone who's certified in that technique. So I don't think we saw any of that level of information from anyone about any of their data. So, you know, you have to kind of take it very lightly if they can't produce that backing documentation that says what method was used and was it done by someone certified in that method. And then, you know, to review the quality control associated with that. So it's a pretty complex, the laboratory aspect is a pretty complex endeavor to produce valid data. It's not just simply someone in the lab, you know, doing an experiment and coming up with a number.
Or testing methods, you're talking about the testing
Correct.
process.
Correct.
So if we can't obtain that information, that data, then how do we move forward with DEEP in dealing with environmental justice communities or the impact on the environment?
Mr. Chairman?
Who's
Al Taylor.
Al, go ahead.
Yeah. I mean, look, you can't move any of this stuff forward unless essentially you have got data that is reliable and that is verifiable. And, you know, if we don't have that, then we're just spinning our wheels here. So the notion basically that I mean, these people essentially are, if they're operating in Europe, and if they have environmental standards in Europe, you mean to tell me that a scientist or an engineer can't look at that data and make some kind of determination? Particularly in light of the fact that, unless my understanding is wrong, that the environmental standards seem to be higher in Europe.
Yeah.
I mean, that's what I'm led to believe in terms of everything that I've read. So I think the issue here basically is that we've got to get hard data. You can't proceed on this without hard data, because that's basically the only way you're either going to convince people or you're going to come to the conclusion that the technology in question doesn't work. So, I mean, I just think that basically, unless we get hard data, and I mean, when I say hard data, that is data that an engineer can look at, okay? And, I don't give a damn if, if they're with, the EPA or what have you, that if it comes out of someplace in Europe, there ought to be some manner or some mechanism to looking at the data and making some kind of assessment or some kind of judgment. Because that's the only thing that's going to get us past the environmental justice issues and questions with regard to air quality. It's going to be the data.
Okay.
Mr. Chairman,
Chairman, Commissioner Patel.
Is there someone else?
I had a question too.
I'm sorry, Andy?
The question in my mind is, what point do we go to an RFP? Because maybe that, to Al's point, can get us the data that we're looking for as part of this process. Or, as we've been offered, the opportunity to see the actual running of the CTEC European operation. At what point do we consider sending a little delegation over? Or is that, again, I don't want to put the cart before the horse. So the only way I think for sure we know, if we see it with our own eyes, that it works. And if we start with medical waste and then move to sludge eventually, after we've proven that it works, or if we can go out there and we don't see that it works, we got to go in a totally different direction.
Okay. David?
Just want again, I don't have a problem with CTEC, but why are we just thinking about CTEC? Again, I'm going to go back. Someone needs to show the numbers of what they are. Then you go off for it. You can't go to RFP with nothing. You got to have.
The only ones that really showed us numbers was CTEC. I mean, everybody else had
No,
partial.
I agree with you 100%. But what are you going to tell CTEC what you're doing for volumes or this or that? I don't know. You don't have anything.
Yeah.
I know we got some Hartford Hospital numbers, which is
We've
great,
got
but you spend time on that.
to dig into this
Absolutely.
more.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah, I mean, CTEC's great, but I really, whatever. It's all right.
Let's sit with staff and let's
Find out what
raise-
they can do.
raise
Yeah.
those issues with them.
Like
Scott's
the
gonna-
Commissioner Salemi said, this could be a really huge opportunity, but I don't know what that is right now. I think it will be.
It has to be profitable.
Mr. Chairman?
I would only add that I think we need to ask our experts
Yeah.
to develop the right questions to hopefully get the data that we're looking for, that we can move forward with to convince the powers to be that this is a viable opportunity for everyone.
Exactly right.
Makes some sense. The second technology.
Mr. Chairman, just one very quick question, and this is really out of left field. If
Commissioner Taylor?
yeah, is there any reason for us not to think carefully about, once we've pulled this thing together, to talk about maybe perhaps talking to the Indians about something along this line? I'm just raising this,
Talking
as
to whom?
as
The tribes.
the Indians, the tribes.
Because they don't.
You mean for a pilot program?
Because they don't have the same. They don't maybe necessarily have to do the same as.
They still have to comply with the federal EPA standards.
That's
In
the-
Connecticut, it would be DEEP. They don't have the right to exceed, they have to, they're responsible to EPA, which in Connecticut.
I understand that. Okay.
The other issue was the biodiesel. Biodiesel now is operational in Danbury. It's been operational, I think, for about 4 months. I had some discussion with the people to find out where they were. And they said they're operating, it's functioning, and they're looking at going to the next step of what they're doing. Maybe it makes some sense to bring them in and have a discussion on where they are, because last time we talked to them, they were in the process of developing and commercializing it, and now it's commercialized. they're actually operating in, I think they're doing it with Veolia, who's runs their wastewater treatment facilities. And they run thousands of them across the world. So it gives you some context of what they're doing and how well they're doing it, and see actually what they're thinking about doing in Connecticut going forward. Is there an objection to bringing them in to
No, I
get
think
further
that'd be great.
information out of them? Kelly, we don't have any problem, do we?
Yes,
We're beyond the
Mr. Chairman,
investigative stage. Okay.
Mr. Chairman, Commissioner Patel here.
Go ahead.
We are
We are
talking
talking
all
all
varieties,
varieties,
different issues.
different issues.
Why don't we
Why don't
ask
we ask
our staff
our staff
to take the
to
lead
take the lead?
and then come up with all the information?
I didn't,
I think you did that, right?
what's that?
I think you're gonna get Scott to do that.
Yeah, right. Yeah, we're gonna sit with Scott and staff, and that's part of what we're gonna stick around with them.
What do you mean we, the committee?
Yes.
What,
Committee, he's asking?
that?
He's asking if the committee got to sit with
Yeah.
Scott? Or you,
Well,
the chairman, or?
We're gonna ask them to sit, yeah, we're not gonna have a committee meeting, we're gonna have them come in, and we will eventually have it. Let's have him bring us up to date on what's going on. He's traveling, unfortunately, he had a conflict, so we'll, as soon as he's back, we'll pursue that with him and bring it back to the
Good,
committee.
thank you.
Further discussion, and what we'll do is we'll contact the biodiesel people.
Hey, just one question. Regarding the biodiesel, if they're interested in coming in, I think they would be. I asked them if they could talk about, I mean, what they're doing now is fine, but to me, it's just not that big of a deal what they're doing now, but where they're planning, I mean, they got everything working. What is the next step to go
That's
to
what I
really
just
a
said.
higher level? That's what I
I
really
said
like to see what they say.
I've asked them to do, to bring us up, you know, they have an investor and they have a whole bunch of
Yeah.
other things
What's the future?
They-
Because what
they
they're
did-
doing now is kind of whatever, it's
that
small.
they did
but
not
what they're gonna
have when we talked to them last time, which was what, about 8 months ago, 7 months ago? Kelly, it was sometime, that was last time we had them in, was at least 7 months ago, 6 months ago. So, yeah, and they do have a plan, they've got investors, they've got a
Yeah,
whole bunch,
beautiful, yeah.
which they did not have when we talked to them last time. Okay, any further questions?
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, this is Al Taylor. I've got a question. Have we asked CTEC? And the only reason I'm mentioning CTEC is they seem to be the only entity around at this point in time that seems to be offering a technology that may or may not work. Have we requested of CTEC that they provide us with the information relative to, one, the environmental standards that they have to meet wherever the relevant operation is in place? What are the nature of those standards? And what hoops do they have to jump through to get clearance?
They have provided
Because
us with the standards that their product would produce.
Well, no,
Relative to what-
no, Bill. What I'm concerned about here is that on the regulatory side, there are certain standards that they have to meet, that they have to jump through, and that apparently there's some kind of testing protocols that are in place that determines whether or not whatever standard that you're posting that they view as being reliable and valid, all right? So if that is the case, then what is it? Because it seems to me that that's a question that we're going to have to answer with regard to any of the regulatory people that we talk to here.
Yeah, I understand that. They have standards that they meet in Europe.
Yes, but the fact of the matter is, what's the comparability of those standards if you look at Europe and the USA? That's all I'm saying. Because the argument that I seem to be hearing here basically is, well, they've come in with standards, but, well, those standards aren't the same as what we would have to meet from the standpoint of either protocols or whatever else. So that basically the number that they give us, that's not going to be acceptable by the EPA or DEP. Well, the question basically is that if they've got a technology, and if you want it to operate here in the U.S. or in Connecticut, what are the standards that they have to comply with? And what are the testing protocols that one has to jump through in order to come through with the appropriate numbers?
Well, when we looked at their technology and we compared it to what the federal standard is, they were significantly below the federal standard that we have here. And they were below the California standard, which is significantly below what the federal one is. California's got a different standard than the other 49 states in the United States. That's the California standard that they set. It's what most of the standards in this country are set based on. They're much further ahead than the federal standard is. And obviously,
but that's not what I heard. But Bill, that's not what I heard from Tom. I mean, what I heard from Tyler is that basically he's saying that they may be giving you numbers, but it's questionable in terms of the standards that one has to comply with here.
Tom,
in other words, are we comparing apples?
Let Tom's here. Let him be more clear.
I believe that's correct.
Well, no, I don't want to get into any debates or fights.
No, I'm not trying to get into a debate. I just wanted to know, you're talking apples to apples here, right?
Well, no, I think that's the problem. We don't have enough to compare or make that comparison. So we don't know if it's apples to apples or apples to oranges or what it is.
Until you do a test on it.
Correct. Yeah. Under certified standards by accredited laboratory. Correct.
And that's a constant because the technology's set up and it can be monitored 24/7. They do that. They claim they do that as a part of their technology. It's a 24-hour standard. But again, you're going to have someone agree to allow us to do a pilot and meet that standard. And I don't know what that is. Do you, Tom?
No, that's what I'm saying. Not what I'm saying, guys. In order for you to even cross that threshold, they're saying basically that they've got a process that meets certain standards, and that those standards, and I guess those are in Europe. What are the protocols that are used there? How do they conduct those tests to get those numbers? I mean, is somebody telling us that so that at least out the box you can look? Or basically, are you saying that it's de novo? They come here, they set up a test, and basically you start testing from scratch. That's all I'm saying.
Well, we'd have to get permission to do that anyway. So, listen, I
understand that, Bill. Yeah, I understand that, Bill. I'm not quibbling or arguing about that, but all I'm saying basically is that if they're claiming that they're operating in Europe and they have to meet certain benchmarks in terms of the people who are responsible for environmental issues there, and there's testing that is taking place, what are those protocols? Have we seen those? Do we know what the process is? If someone who's an engineer or a scientist here, and if they looked at what they're doing in Europe, would they look at it and say, well, yeah, that pretty much is how we're going to do it or how we would do it? Looks pretty good. That's all I'm saying.
Okay.
Mr. Chairman, Chris Stone raised his hand.
Chris?
Hi, good afternoon, Mr. Chairman. Good afternoon, everybody. I'm sorry I couldn't be there in person. Just one quick comment. This is Chris Stone, District Council. To Commissioner Taylor's point, and he's spot on. It's more than just getting numbers from the particular technology company. It's about the verification of those numbers by an independent verifying entity. So, for example, we have testing for all our facilities going on all the time. If we were to tell DEEP or EPA, oh, here's our numbers, trust us, that it's just not enough. They need independent verification. We have that in everything we do, particularly in our stacks down at the Hartford plant. So what we're looking for, whether it's CTEC or anyone else, is particularly on the environmental side, knowing how sensitive those issues are, is some independent verification that the numbers not only meet the regulatory requirements, but what are the numbers and how do they compare to what is required here in the United States, for example. So I think it's more than just a company saying, we do this or we do that, or here's our numbers, believe us, we need them independently verified. I don't think we have that from anybody, quite frankly. And I could be wrong, Tom, you may want to correct me if I'm wrong, but I don't think we have that from anyone.
All we have is their numbers.
Yeah.
The certification is another issue.
Yeah.
That's correct.
Okay.
Yeah.
Independent certification, and Commissioner Taylor is right on that.
Further questions? Okay. Item number, opportunity for general public comment.
Mr. Chairman, can we go back to any further questions?
I said it. Is there any further?
I know, I have
questions?
one, I'm sorry.
Okay.
Just to follow up on what Attorney Stone said, that have we asked CTEC or any of the others to allow us to obtain that information?
I have not had any conversations with CTEC. They were in at the Capitol when I was there. Their lobbyist was there, and that's the only one I ever talked to.
You know, and I didn't mean for you to ask, but I wasn't sure whether the committee had asked. But
Right.
Can the committee ask to put together a informational packet requesting
Yes.
that independent verification, certification of one or more of their facilities in Europe?
We can do that.
If I might, Mr. Chairman,
Go ahead.
Chris Stone, District Council. My recollection, and I could be wrong, and Tom Tyler may be able to expound on this, but my recollection is that we asked for, they represented that their numbers were, CTEC that is, their numbers were independently verified, certified, whatever, what have you. We asked for the results of those certifications or verifications. I'm not saying they withheld them intentionally. I just don't believe we have them, received them after that request, or that we have requested again.
We can request them again.
Well, we should follow up. We should follow up on that. To Chairman Curry's point, we should follow up on that.
Okay, yeah,
Sorry,
you're
I'm
right.
sorry.
We did, and they produced them, and I can't remember what the English, it was the English government officials, and they have a different standard of it. They don't have an EPA, they call it something else.
Right.
It certifies
Well, if they
they
wouldn't have sent that information obviously to the legal department, but we'll check with Tom, if you can look at your records, and I'll check with Scott as to whether he received anything. And if we have, and those have to be somehow interpreted based upon the standards here in the United States, then we should be able to do that. If they haven't, then we should be able to get them from a particular technology company, whether it's CTEC or anyone else, quite frankly.
I believe they submitted it to, but it was quite a while ago, and I can't remember what English government agency they used, but they had it because they operate over there.
Right, and it's not just submitting results from for example, a facility that just processes plastics, for example. It's the data has to be from a like entity as the NDC, and as the NDC would employ that particular technology. So And that may be where they may or may not have had the information. I'm not sure. But I'm raising a lot of questions, but I don't have a lot of answers. I apologize. We'll look into those issues and certainly report back to it shouldn't be a long turnaround.
Yeah,
We'll
I
report
agree.
back to the committee at its next meeting.
Thank you, Counselor. Further questions? Further questions? Opportunity for general public comment, item 8. Commissioners' requests for future agenda items, item number 9.
Chairman, I would say,
Commissioner Adams?
even if it's too soon to bring it up, I still think we should have on the agenda at some point an RFP, consideration for an RFP.
I don't know where that fits in. Let's talk to council.
Okay.
And staff relative to that issue. Further requests? If not, the appropriate motion to adjourn is in order.
So moved.
Without objection, we stand adjourned.